Hi, I'm Taylor O'Hara, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. It was really easy to get shaky up here, like they're all saying. So I guess I'm the young person in Alcoholics Anonymous speaker for today. I sobered up September of 18th of 2012, and so I was 19 years old. I'm 26 now. So the past 6 years have been wild but amazing at the same time. This bout of sobriety was not my first go around, but thankfully this last round I was exposed to like actual solution from this amazing book right here. So to start off with, we'll start back at being a young child. I grew up in Salem, Utah, and very conservative place, very beautiful place, but a lot of shame oriented culture and stuff like that. And I have 5 siblings, so there's 6 of us, 5 girls, 1 boy. So I grew up with primarily sisters, loved it. We're like best friends. One of them just got here, I think, with my daughter. That's another big part of my life. She just turned 4 on Wednesday. I almost said 3. A 4-year-old daughter named Hannah, and I actually named her after the facility that I got sober at. So it's called Hannah's House. And if it weren't for that place, man, I wouldn't be able to be a mom. And being a mom has been the most incredible blessing that I could have ever received. So I started using some outside issues when I was pretty young. My father was an alcoholic and was actually the first person that I found that, the drinking that made me feel okay inside. And was my person who I used with. And so I grew up really thinking that it was pretty acceptable. But, my story does involve a lot of trauma. But, the only reason I bring any of that stuff up is because I got sober regardless of a lot of stuff that weighed me down as a kid. And I also came to understand that regardless of the stuff that happened to me growing up, I would have had this deal with or without it, I think a lot of times, especially younger women, we come into the rooms thinking we've got to have a reason or an excuse to justify what we've been doing. And that's just not the case, He talked about it earlier that this is a disease and it's fatal and it's progressive, and that's something that I never really knew, So that first time I got that chemical inside of me, I could take a deep breath and I could feel comfortable and I could show up to things. And I always had a lot of friends, I was never shy. I was outgoing. I was happy. But inside I was so uncomfortable. I didn't feel like anybody really liked me, and everything was about me. We'll put that out there right now. I was a drama queen. I had to be the center of attention from being this high. It's funny, my daughter, she's the same way. Little ray of sunshine, but oh my goodness, attention has to be on Hannah. But I always had to be at the center of the attention, and the world kind of revolved around me, And as I got older, I found, growing up in school, I found those outlets that were healthy, that I felt comfortable in. I loved music. I loved softball. I was on the golf team. I tried to find those things to make me feel good and exert myself and stuff like that. But I had this whole other life that I was, this secret life that I was living with my dad. And there was a lot of abuse involved. When I was watching the time too, when I was 18 years old, my dad was sent to jail for the abuse that had been done to me, and the trial began for him to go to prison. And that was the hardest thing that I've ever experienced in my life, was getting up on the stand and testifying against my own father. And that day I lost everything. I lost my best friend. The state of Utah put an order that we can't communicate, and we haven't since he's been locked up. So That was really hard, but very necessary. When I came forward, there were about 5 or 6 other victims that had came forward due to his abuse. So he went to prison. He got 2, 3 to life sentences. And in my head, the way I processed things as an alcoholic was like, okay, he's the problem, and he's not here anymore, and now I'll just be sober, you know. But I was very delusional. He was absolutely not the problem. He caused a lot of problems for me, but the problem was within myself from the time I was itty bitty, just constantly needing something to change the way that I felt, because I never felt comfortable in my own skin. So he went to prison, and man, I fell off the deep end quick and hard. I went to treatment for the first time 2 days after he was sentenced to prison, and I wish I could say it was a good experience. I was honestly not ready. I got there, and it was a co-ed facility, not good for this 18-year-old girl. Found my rehab boyfriend right within that first week. He made me feel good. And it was meant to be, you know. And I stayed for the whole 90 days, and I did the work. But when I got there, you know, they handed us this book, and they handed us a 12 and 12 and a notebook, you know, to journal. And but no one, I remember I was detoxing in the bathtub, and I opened the book, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's, I don't understand. This is a very old book. And I just threw it to the side, because I'm like, this doesn't apply to me. And I saw these older men and women that were talking about they've been to jail, and they've been to prison, and they've lived under a bridge. And it's like, I hadn't experienced any of that yet. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have any tattoos. I didn't smoke. Nothing. I'm like, I'm better than everybody. That's honestly, the ego was going hard. And so I did the 90 days. You know, I kind of got down with step 1, but their version of step 1 was this packet. We didn't touch this book. It was this packet. Are you powerless? How is your life unmanageable? Write it out. Okay, that doesn't really tell me what my problem is. It tells me the consequences and repercussions of my problem, but it didn't really ever tell me what my actual problem is. What does powerlessness mean? You know, I was never exposed to this is a disease or anything like that. And so I do the packets, you know, I read my 4th step to my male therapist, sex inventory, the whole 9 yards. And I get out, I go to sober living, I make it for 1 week. And this whole time I'm still obsessing. The obsession is still very present. I get to sober living, and I quickly relapsed. Went back to the facility, stayed for 2 days, snuck out during family week. Packed a bag, snuck out. I didn't use at this point, but I in my head, I'm like, oh, I got this. Like, I just needed to go get a little refresh course, couple days under my belt. I'm going to go to meetings, you know. But the obsession for me didn't always look like I'm thinking about using again. It looked like the insanity of like the fact that I thought if I went to a place to get separated for 2 days, I would be just fine and I'd never do it again. You know, just those insane thoughts. And like, so I get out, and I didn't use right away. I went home, and my mom and my sister were there, and we all had some words, and my mom handed me a tent and told me I couldn't come home. So I ventured up into the mountains of Utah with my little tent. I'm like, cool, I like camping. So I lived up in that little tent off and on throughout that whole year. I did end up going to jail, and all those things that I hadn't done, I got those under my belt. But that was the problem, is that I thought those were the things that I had to have happen in order to be an alcoholic, which is so far from the truth. You know, that's not what this book says. We get really stuck. I got really stuck on consequences that come from this, but everybody's consequences kind of look differently. You know, having had worked, for most of my recovery, I've worked in the treatment industry, and I've seen people that come in with their jobs, with money in their savings account still, which was shocking to me, and a home, and the wife or the husband and the kids, and they still have it all externally, but internally they're dying. You know, so I learned where I ended up getting sober, speed it up, I'm running out of time. I lived in this little tent, went in and out of, jail. I got sent to a treatment center in the jail. That was really not fun. And I get out and I'm just miserable. And it was not the fact of living in a tent, knowing where I'm going to eat next, doing the things I was doing that drove me to want to get sober. Of course, those were huge factors. It was this feeling of like, I'm 18 years old and I was 19. I don't want to live, but I'm so scared to die. And at this point, I did not have, my family was done. Everybody was done. And at the beginning of the year after my dad was sentenced to prison, I had been offered to go on the Dr. Phil show. And I said, absolutely not. That is rude for you to even ask. I'm already in treatment. At the end of that year, I was begging for any help that I could get. They threw the offer on the table again, and I said, yeah, whatever I got to do. They said, now don't sneak anything through the airport because we will not get you out of that situation. Of course I did. Didn't get caught, but of course I did, because I could not bear the thought of going to do something without having something in my system to make me feel right, even though it really didn't work anymore, and so I get to the show, and the night before they tell me, all you got to do is shower. We'll take care of the rest. We'll do your makeup. We'll do your hair. I was so sick the next morning. I could not manage to shower. I just rumbled out of bed and went, they came, picked us up, took us to the studio, and they just slapped dry shampoo, and because I was just nasty. And they took care of me. So I at the end of the show, good old Dr. Phil, he looks at me and says, you're worth this. And he tells me I'm going to Hannah's house on South Padre Island, this all-female facility, which is exactly what I needed. I did not need to be around any men. And he said, say goodbye to your family. I said goodbye to my family, and the owner of the treatment center picked me up, and we flew to Houston, and from Houston drove to the island. And I remember on the way down to the island, the owner of this treatment center, he was wild. Him and the nurse, he brought a nurse with him so they could, kind of help me detox a little bit easier. They were singing and dancing to the music in the car, and I was like, I remember asking him, are you always this happy? I'm like, are you, because he had already disclosed to me that he was in recovery and everything, and he had been for a long time. And he said, yeah. He was like, I love being sober, all these things. I'm like, how could you possibly love to be sober, and he started telling me a little bit about the program and stuff like that, and I was honestly just so out of it, and I don't remember much. But I get to this facility at about 6 a.m. that morning, because we took a red eye and then that drive, and so I get there and I go out to this dock on the bay, and I walk out there and I'm alone and I'm scared, but I just wanted to be, I wanted to be by myself for a bit. And I go out there and I'm looking at this sunrise, and a bunch of women start walking out to the dock, and I'm like, how are these women up so early? They're sober, they're getting up, and and this one woman, she was very tall. And she comes out and she just doesn't even care, doesn't even ask me if she can hug me. She just wraps her arms around me and says, welcome home, baby. And I just melted in her arms and started bawling. I had never felt so sure that I made the right decision. And from that day forward, my detox was long and hard. It took a minute for my body to get right again and stuff like that. I mean, really and truly, the first year I was just up and down, sick, not sick, And they would tell me, I would go to group and my stomach would be bothering me, so I would, throw up, and they would say, well, you can go lay down, And I would tell them, absolutely not. I just want to be with people. I want to feel better. Not physically, I want to feel better internally. Because you take the alcohol away from me and the problem's still there untreated. So I need something else to come in quick and treat that so that I don't get loaded again. And so And that's exactly what they did. I was exposed to this program. Not only were we given this book, every single morning we read On Awakening from page 86 together as women as the sun rose. And then we did yoga. And to work on getting our bodies right again, to work on becoming present for the day. And from there, we went to a big book study where we thoroughly, oh my gosh, I never have seen this book the way that I saw it when someone explained it to me. And I came in there thinking, I know everything about AA. I know all the one-liners. I know all the sayings and stuff. So obviously I know the 12 steps. That couldn't have been further from the truth, because all those sayings and one-liners, a lot of them come from here, but a lot of them don't, And so I was brought up in this program in a way where it's like, if you can't reconcile it with this book, probably throw it to the side, And I am so grateful for that. I was exposed to this actual solution. They told me what my problem is. They told me about the disease of alcoholism and how powerful and how progressive it is, and that I am powerless. And to me, and that was kind of more thoroughly explained in a way that I could understand it, that you're powerless, but get connected to God. God gives you power, And I was absolutely 100% restored to sanity, like probably around steps 5 and 6. I was brought up in this program in a way where we worked the steps quickly, thoroughly but quickly, because like I said, I'm disconnected. That one thing that makes me feel okay needs to be replaced with God. And the only way I can feel that connection is via these 12 steps. And so they took us through quickly and thoroughly. And, by the time I got out, I did stay at this facility for about 18 months. Because like I said, trauma is a huge part of my story. I went through extensive amounts of EMDR. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but and neuroplasticity work with my brain and stuff, learned how powerful my mind is, and there was no better place for me to connect with the creator of this universe than that island. Anytime I go back down to that island, it's like I feel at home, and growing up in the program down there, we had a lot of those old timers taking us through the book and stuff like that just made such a difference, Step 4, I just want to share this real quick because this has been very true in my life currently. This couldn't have been more true. It's on page 66. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave, and we found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit, the insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again, and with us to drink is to die. Reading those words, I felt doomed, But as soon as I start putting pen to paper, I find myself like, it's just loads of just heaviness on my chest being lifted. I remember reading my 5th step to my first sponsor, and just, oh my gosh, solid, strong woman in this program. It was probably about a 3 to 4 hour 5th step, and what I loved about it was that she redirected me. She didn't sit there and pat me on the back and say, "Oh, you're doing good job," pat me on the butt. She told me the truth. She told me, this is selfish, because I don't need somebody to comfort me. I need somebody to tell me and point out this selfishness that's blocking me from being free. And sometimes that hurts, but it's absolutely necessary. And she gave me full doses of truth about myself and my spiritual condition that I had never seen, never looked at. And I was pretty shook up. But I took those into a productive step 6 and 7. I spent that hour alone with God afterwards, going through the work I had done, asking myself, did I omit anything? Did I leave anything out? Anything I felt like I had left out, I did a quick little 4th step, kind of going through it, I saw, you know what, I wasn't really fully honest about that because I was ashamed. So we went back and I was fully honest about those things I kind of soft served to her. Step 7, I went out to that dock with the women, and we actually all held hands, and I said that prayer with them. And there's just something so powerful about being with women, you know, on the same journey. Obviously the men too, but it's just, there's not as many women pretty much across the board as there are men. And so it's like being in a place where I was surrounded by 15, 20 women who knew what I was going through, no judgment. It just was so empowering, you know, and at the place I was at, they really pushed us to empower each other. And so I did that 7-step prayer. I couldn't go make amends because I was on this little island and I'm from Utah. And so I did some little practice amends, you know. I did make some amends to girls I'd been a little catty with at the facility, you know. There was a little bit of that. At the same time, empowering. We also were all very sick. So, but you take men out of the equation, there was a lot less drama than there was when I was at the co-ed facility. Just saying. But, you know, I made some amends to some of the women that maybe I had brushed the wrong way. And that was a good place for me to start, you know, I wrote out all of my amends cards. So what my sponsor had me do was get those little index cards and write out my amends to each person. And if I owed that person money, I would draw a big old money sign on the back so I could ask them how and, you know, if I could pay them back. So I moved into sober living, and I originally got a job at a surf shop, you know, and I'm happy, joyous, and free at this point. I am like on top of the world. I've always got neon color bandanas over my forehead. I have a big old bun on the top of my head, and I'm finally getting a tan. And, you know, I'm working at this surf shop. I'm sponsoring women. My first sponsee was 55, and I was 20 at this point. And I remember when she asked me, I was so incredibly terrified. I was like, I don't know. I'm only 20. Do you want me to sponsor you? And she said yes, because you're happy and I just want to be happy. And if you can show me how to do that, then absolutely. And so we did. I took her through the steps pretty quickly, and she got free and she got restored to sanity, not because of me, but because of the power of God. And she's since passed due to like health issues, but I saw that woman thrive in life because of this program. You know, a lot of times I hear things like from sponsees, well, it doesn't work, like I've done it, you know. And my question is always, have you done all of it? 1 through 12, first 164 pages of the book, that's it in the beginning for me when I'm sponsoring women, because that's how I was taken through. Usually the answer is like, well, I did the 4th step, you know, or I made a couple amends, but it's not going to work if you don't do it the way that it's written, you know. If you leave out even one of those amends, I mean, it's a matter of time before that insanity can come back. If you live in a resentment and that grouch and the brainstorm comes back, it's a matter of time before you might get loaded again, you know. I worked at this surf shop. I was thriving. I was so happy. I got a job on a 50-foot catamaran and lived under sail 7 days a week on this boat, and like got to be the first mate and pull the sail up. And I knew nothing about boats, but I learned. And I was out on the water every day, and I could just feel the power of God. I mean, when you're sailing, it's literally like, you know, it's like the wind. It's like you're going at God's speed. It played such a huge part into my spirituality. And I lived there, you know, and I hit 18 months and decided, you know, God did not get me sober to just sit and do the same thing. I'm 21 years old. I'm going to go to school. So I applied here at Texas Tech, and they give scholarships for people in recovery. And I got in, and that was a huge deal for me because I did not have a good GPA in high school. I did graduate by the grace of God, but I did not have a good GPA to get into a school like this. And I got in, and I moved down here knowing a couple people. My best friend who I got sober with, she was here. I moved into a house with a person I had never met before. I did not have a car. My license was still suspended. I got a job day 2 of being here at Rudy's Barbecue. I just trusted God. You know, this door opened and I took it. I just went, just some blind faith. And I didn't do so well with all the freedom originally. I mean, I was 21 years old, lacked a lot of discipline. I find out that I'm pregnant a couple months later with my beautiful little blonde girl there in the back, Hannah. And I had never been so terrified in my entire life. I knew things weren't going to work with the dad. He had relapsed shortly after I found out I was pregnant. Another, young sobriety couple. We were doing good. I found out I was pregnant, so I moved home. I knew I had some decisions to make. Am I going to keep her, give her up for adoption? And I pretty early on made the decision to keep her, And I moved home and I had this little girl, and I'll tell you what, I have not had a more spiritual experience than the day I gave birth to her. So I did get pretty dry after I had Hannah. I was living at home with my parents, a single mom, very scared, and let that fear kind of take over. There's not a solid recovery base in the area I'm from, Utah. And so I really got onto some pretty shaky ground. The obsession didn't quite return, but I'm really glad you brought up this just getting dry in sobriety, because that's hit me more than it should in recovery, only because I get complacent, not because of anybody else, but just because life's going good and I'm like, oh, I don't need to do a nightly review tonight, or I'm too tired to meditate in the morning or say my prayers or whatever. And it's just those little things that kind of start trickling and going away. And then I start feeling sick again. So I kind of started experiencing that. Just being a mom, I was tired. I was working, I was tired. I was just kind of felt stuck. Like I had worked so hard to get free and go to school. But I also really wanted to be a mom, And so I made the decision to come back to Lubbock. In our community, especially the younger community, a lot of people come and go just because it's a college town. And so you see a lot of faces and then they leave. Another huge piece of that is the amount of overdoses and suicides that we have. I can't tell you, I think I've lost 5 friends just this past year. Young people. It's sick and it's sad. And that's why I continue to sponsor women, because there are not enough of us out there. And I've had more friends die by their own hand than by overdose or anything like that in sobriety, or off that first relapse. And it breaks my heart. So every day that I'm sober, I try to help the next person, or I break my own anonymity every day, because I work in the restaurant business now. So I work at 2 restaurants, and I always tell them I'm in recovery, because you would be amazed at how many of those people in the restaurant industries are struggling with alcoholism or addiction. And just putting my name out there, I'll have the manager pull me aside. Hey, this server over here is really struggling. Is there any way that maybe y'all can meet, or you could come in and we can talk to her together? It's put me in so many opportunities to be useful, So I'm never shy about the fact that I'm in recovery, because it's given me some beautiful opportunities to help people. There are days I definitely don't want to help. I have those days where I'd rather just sit with Hannah and watch Netflix, or go to a movie, or go to the park. But it's usually in those times that I need to do it the most, because I need to be brought out of my selfishness. Steve and I were just talking about it earlier. You hear all the time, this is a selfish program, but really and truly, I cannot afford to be selfish anymore. So for me, what that looks like is helping other people, and then that takes me out of that selfishness and puts my thoughts on another person who really needs help. And as a result of that, I become more free than I could have ever hoped for, And watching these women recover, and men, is such a miracle, and it's such a blessing. To be honest, this past year, relationships have been a huge issue in my life, if you have not picked up on that. It's constantly the boyfriend's going to fix me, he's going to make me feel better, I'm going to fix him. And it has gotten a whole lot better, but I love what you said about just keeping my heart open, because God gave me the ability to love, and the book says, in talking about sex relations, it's not to be used selfishly or lightly or to be loathed, and so I really try to live by that I constantly keep my heart open to love, and that God will provide what I need if I keep close to him and perform his work well. And that's been the case. This past year I have allowed myself to get a little too complacent, and I'll just be honest about that, because like he said, y'all are my people. And I've been raised in this program. I've been brought up. My adulthood's been sober. I got sober before I was even old enough to legally drink. But I did enough drinking to last all my adulthood. But I'm just so incredibly grateful that I can't even imagine. I hear so many, especially probably a lot of you in this room, that had to go through the alcoholism while already having kids. And I can't imagine. I've learned through having Hannah that she can't keep me sober. Like, as perfect and beautiful as she is, like, I know no human power today can keep me sober, not even my perfect little beautiful girl. And so I try to keep my reliance and dependence off of her and any human beings, Easier said than done, of course, but I am so grateful that I have this power of God in my life today, and that I try to live my life in a way that invites this power, because it's ignited my imagination for life again, and my ability to love people, and the fellowship that I've been surrounded with. I teared up a little bit when I saw Steve. He probably didn't even notice, because people like Steve are like home to me, family, home, like just kind of my home base. When I see those people, and it's just people in the program, people outside of this fellowship don't understand the bond that comes. We don't know each other personally. We don't really have to. I mean, I walk into a room like this and feel instantly bonded, and I have not experienced that with any other, I grew up in church. I grew up in church, youth camps, all those types of things, but never ever have I felt this kind of connection with people. And that's such a huge blessing in my life. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Go ahead and wrap it up. It's time. I'm grateful for this program, and I'm grateful for all of you, and especially those of you who've been around a while that continue to keep those doors open and help the newcomer. And that's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.